Hi, everyone, and welcome to the workshop called And Shuffle, a new approach to course design using OER content strategy cards with our speakers, Huang Lu and John Murray from Ryerson University. So both speakers will be presenting this workshop together. So without further ado, I would like to present Mr. John Murray and Huang Lu.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Before I officially begin, I would like you to take a minute or two to answer this poll that's going to be in the link Zoom chat. John will post the link there. So we just want to get to know your thoughts on OERs and course design.
And you should all see the link in the chat now. If you can just go there, it's a quick two question poll.
So the first questions ask about your familiarity with OERs. You can choose more than one option. And I'll share the results screen as you go in. And the first question here is, how familiar are you with OERs? So one person refers them to in their work. Two people see the potential but haven't designed one yet. And one person thinks it's open sesame. So, and the second question is about the areas of online design, course design that you find most important for student engagement, student-centered approaches. So today's, as you can see, we got 3 activities lined up with a little bit of in-between talk about the cards, giving an overview of the cards. We'll start with your reflections on student engagement. Then we get you right on hands-on activity with using the cards to address some course design challenges and sharing with you the multiple ways or uses of these cards. And finally, we'd like you to share your thoughts on how you would use the cards later on. You'll walk away definitely from this session with a card resource hub that the team has created for you to explore further and even adapt the cards that would fit your content, your needs. So we go right into the next activity here. So this one is to get you to think about, your thoughts and reflections on student engagement. So for example, things that you do to ensure student engagement in online courses, and what are some of the challenges that you may have faced or even if you haven't faced it or you may have heard about it. So John will share the link in the chat for the Jamboard. You'll see on the left, there's the 4th icon is the sticky note icon. You can click on that icon and type your thoughts and ideas and post it in the box. That is it things that you want to ensure student engagement or challenges that you may have experienced or seen.
And also, because we're a small group, feel free to also type your ideas in the chat too, if that's easier for you.
Yeah.
You can think back to some of the ideas shared in that first poll too, that you answered all of the above too, in terms of student-centered approaches, because those also enhance student engagement as well. So if there's any of those in particular that you think are extra important, you could note those down. Anything you may have noticed around remote teaching and difficulties there, if you have kids or have seen sort of the difficulties arising with online learning these days, you can note any of those as well.
Especially with since COVID hit, everyone has been somewhat forced to go virtual and online. What are some of the challenges or some things that you've been doing in the past year that has worked really well to engage learners? You can also come on the mic if you feel comfortable, since it's a fairly small group today. Okay, so this one is best practices. And so we have here creating opportunities to engage with content and classmates, such as polls, questions, discussions, and group activities. Let students propose activities and let them help run those activities. That's great. So giving them that ownership of their learning path as well. Keep students doing things, interacting, talking, debating, and exchanging. Great ideas. So keep them interactive. Keep this session short. Okay. And then some challenges is distractions, a lot of distractions at home. You may see some distractions behind me as well if my sons are walking back and forth. Technical difficulty, yes, definitely. So that's one thing that I want to make sure that, you know, it's normal. It happens. So unfamiliarity with platforms, quite passive participants. Yes. Okay, so great. Thank you for sharing those ideas with us. So as we go into, so now John, I'll hand over the mic to John so he can give you an overview of the how the cards started out and some details about the cards before we get back to the next activity.
You should see my screen here with a hand holding some blank cards. So yeah, speaking of technical difficulties with your the challenges that you mentioned, we didn't see your Jamboard responses right away, right? So, but now that we did, thank you for sharing those ideas and some of those challenges. And we went through, as an instructional design team, working on online continuing ed courses at Ryerson University. We went through a very similar brainstorming session on, okay, what do we want to try to accomplish in terms of best practices of student engagement? And where are those challenges and how do we address them in our course design process? So we had this brainstorming session back in spring 2019 as part of a revamp of our course design process. We really wanted to find a way to increase our support in the area of student engagement when working with subject matter experts and faculty. And we wanted to emphasize those student engagement and student-centered approaches from the very beginning of the onboarding process. So this really led to two questions that came out of our brainstorming sessions. And one was, how do we start an instructional designer, subject matter expert dialogue about student engagement as early as possible in the course design process? And the second one was sort of a more global one, is how do we make our course design process more student-centered? And our answer to these questions was the creation of our card deck of content strategy cards that you will be exploring. Actually have a chance to explore all 7 of them later on in the session and use them to address a few scenarios. So I'll show you the 7 cards that we came up with here. We narrowed it down to these 7 cards based on adult learning principles, the Universal Design for Learning framework, research on online pedagogy, and probably most importantly, our working experiences as IDs. So a team of 7 instructional designers who have worked on a variety of online courses across discipline areas. And so we really saw these as sort of these were broad enough, but also within them, we could get to sort of suggesting more specific actionable strategies on these topics. And so this is where we arrived in our brainstorming on what we thought was needed for student engagement in our specific case, which was online continuing education courses. But keeping in mind that even though they're supporting online course design, the overall strategies here could apply to classroom learning as well, right? And they could be adapted to use for designing in-person learning experiences. And we'll have a bit more about that later in the workshop. But it was really this stacking of the deck with these 7 cards it was our hope that we would get away from some of the more administrative and more prescriptive aspects of our onboarding process and really get SMEs from the beginning to talk through their assumptions, expectations, and challenges around student engagement in online courses. So those were the 7 card areas, and each card, I'll use the facilitating online discussions card as an example. Each card is sort of laid out as follows. And there are 3 main sections to the card. So you'll see there's an overarching key question related to the content strategy. There's a section that provides some ideas for how to apply the content strategy under the what you can try. And there's a section that lists some overall benefits to students. In the top right corner of each card, you'll see the little icons, and these represent the three main modes of student engagement. So student instructor, student to student, and student to content. And so some of the content strategy cards encompass all three modes, and others are more focused on one or two of these modes of engagement. You also see that sort of yellow post-it looking box on this card. And that's an area where we had a section to sort of level up in game speech, or go one step further in your thinking about designing for student engagement. So we really wanted these cards to sort of appeal to as subject matter experts and faculty with varying levels of experience in designing online courses. So if you're approaching online course design for the first time, these cards would provide those actionable strategies that you might want to try out. But if you had more experience with online course design, then they really help sort of validate your current approaches to engagement and maybe level up in certain areas. We really wanted them to be used as a tool. They could both inspire idea sharing and planning around student engagement among peers in our workshop setting, but also could be used in one-on-one course design working sessions with instructional designers. So we wanted to open up that discussion, have subject matter experts and faculty feel that they could lay their cards on the table, right, and play sort of have a face-up discussion about these issues. So in the workshops we've used them in our one-on-one sessions, they've definitely been well received. We'll cycle back a bit to this later on in the workshop, but now we really want to get you sort of seeing the cards and seeing how useful you think they would be in addressing some online learning scenarios. So I'm going to go into that Google Doc activity worksheet. Hong will be sharing that in a second. But first I want to sort of give you a quick walkthrough of what you'll see there. You'll be put in a breakout room, and we have, I think, a small session, but probably maybe 2 breakout rooms. And within that, you'll be taking as a small group about 2 or 3 minutes to go through the 7 content strategy cards. So there's a link there to the PDF. You'll see it here, and you can scroll through and take a quick look at them. I'll go back. And then clicking on your breakout room number below, once you're in a breakout room, take the next sort of 8 or so minutes to discuss any solutions or strategies to your assigned scenario, and what content strategy cards might be useful in addressing that scenario. And then we'll come back after those 10 minutes to the main room and have a brief discussion. Each group can have one of the group members to share and sort of what it was like working with those cards, if they helped address the scenario, and what some of your strategies and solutions would be. So again, Hong will be sharing this link momentarily that you can access and edit. And within there, just click on your breakout room group once you're in one, and there'll be a place for you to select the cards you've used to address this, read the scenario, select the cards you've used to address the scenario, and then take a few notes on any solutions or strategies that your group recommends. So we'll be coming back to this doc in about 10 minutes as a group, as a whole group.
All right, so everyone's back.
Wonderful. So yeah, it looks like a lot of great ideas shared here, and if anyone would like to come on the group from, I know it's a small session today, so it was just one group, but you dealt with sort of one of the most comprehensive scenarios here in terms of student agency and voice. So where, as you saw, a lot of the cards can apply. But if anyone wants to come on from the group on the mic to sort of explain what it was like to use the cards and think through and address this, or multiple, one or more people to come on and talk through any of the ideas here.
Sure. I don't mind.
Okay.
Hi, this is Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
I was also the note taker, so I was doing
Okay.
my best as people were talking to capture what they were saying.
Yes.
I think it was nice for us because we have a mix of experience. So some of us work in academics and some of us work in corporate. And so when we read the scenario, we were really thinking through different lenses. For myself, I'm on the corporate side. So I read through the scenario and kind of my first reaction is, well, I have questions, when it says there's no room for flexibility, what does that mean? And again, what kind of timeline are we dealing with? How long do we have to make changes? What kind of resources do we have to make changes? What kind of access do we have to people who, may be able to change that no room for flexibility rule?
It sounds already that if you were to use the cards in your environment, there would need to be maybe the resources required for that strategy, right? Or timing required, or maybe things like that if you were thinking of adapting them to a more corporate environment.
Yep.
No room for flexibility. In this case, we were really looking at more, we design for online continuing education courses. They're about 13 weeks long, but the student sort of voice and choice in what they get to do. That's sort of, they didn't see any of that in this given scenario that we created. But yeah.
But I also want to add, so a recent course that I've worked on where I've shared some suggestions and strategies for student engagement. But the idea of, even though it's an online course, but there are 2,000 students in this particular course, taking this course through 7 sections, for example. So that also, so the concern is also about, if we give too many options, then students complain. So it comes down to a variety of different issues as well. And some of the ideas for more engagement wasn't taken well because of the large size of the student numbers in these courses as well.
And very interesting that there was a chronology sort of attached to this, right? And using the cards, starting with digital stories and personality, and then sort of moving from there. We've used the cards sort of with our instructors, SMEs, and they sort of may latch on to a few of the cards. Like, I really want to make sure my content's readable and have great online discussions. And then they'll sort of discount some of the cards. Some will use them as a whole. But very interesting to think about, do some of these come before other strategies, right? And so I think that's a very interesting angle to take on this.
And I just want to add one more thing is, usually when we design a course, we right off the bat, we looked at the student target audience, right? So the incorporate target audience, or who what are the student persona. We do take that into consideration in our conversations with our subject matter experts. And I guess, you do the same, Sarah, in corporate, right? Is who are these training sessions, who are taking these training sessions, and how do we cater these sessions so that it meets the needs of the participants?
So you're welcome to, we're going to move on to sort of how you can adapt the cards and different uses of the cards. I think that will flow nicely, but there's many other scenarios in this document. So if you keep the link and you want to sort of explore the cards further and sort of see how they could apply to different scenarios, you can have a look in this document. So I'll go back here. And now really getting into the adaptability and the multifunctionality of these cards. And getting back to the idea of OER. So in the opening poll, I think 2 of you said that you're familiar with them, but you haven't actually created any. And 1 responded open sesame. So we decided to create these as fully adaptable cards. An open education resource being a teaching resource that can be used and reused freely. And under a Creative Commons license. And these we've released under a CC BY 4.0, which means you can copy and redistribute the material in any medium or format. You can also remix, transform and build upon them, as long as you attribute them and provide a link to the license. So really you can use the framework of these cards, the layout, and use them for in many different ways. So one way that they could be used, obviously, is as a course design checklist, right? So this means that the cards should be used at the course planner or outline stage to ensure that student engagement is top of mind. But it could also be used if you're drafting a specific lesson or module, right? To double check that students are engaged and supported in their learning, that assessments align, and items like that. They can be used within a faculty development workshop. We've used them in many development workshops. And this is really how when we first launched the cards, this is how we use them. Not only are they a great conversation starter between instructional designers and subject matter experts, but they can be a great tool for SMEs to learn from each other, because the cards can sort of facilitate the sharing of success stories as well as the sharing of challenges related to engaging students. Another way is to sort of step back and use them at the curriculum planning level. When you're looking across certificates or degree programs or training offerings, and what you really want to focus on in terms of student engagement. And that maybe it's you want to really cultivate an inclusive and caring learning environment. Okay, so how are the cards going to help you with that? Or how are you going to put the students in the driver's seat and really get them to apply their learning, and have some hands-on practical opportunities and design your courses and modules around that. And a fourth way would be to inform a teaching and learning charter. So really that's thinking of a charter as a list of guiding principles or commitments and responsibilities for both teachers and students, to ensure that the teaching and learning is reciprocal and student-centered. And the University of Saskatchewan really has a great example of a learning charter if you're interested in sort of seeing some of those student and teacher commitments to each other. So those are just some of the ways to sort of use the cards in their current format. Still would need to be adapted for your situations, and whether that's college, university, K-12, government, corporate, nonprofit. This is sort of how to use them in a course design, for course design purposes. But going beyond that, this OER designation really means that you can take a cards-based approach and use this cards-based approach to address training and teaching topics beyond course design. So maybe you like the layout of the cards, but want to create a deck on strategies for effective facilitation, or strategies for successful collaboration. You can even do a student-facing card deck, right? And around study strategies or strategies to be successful as a self-directed learner, more and more important as we enter into, or as we have lived through remote learning. So really a wide range of ways that you can use the cards for both course design or to sort of branch off and look at other teaching and training topics. So now just a quick activity to sort of see, now that you've used the cards in the breakout activity to address the scenario, sort of seen some of the uses we've laid out there and ways they could be adapted. Any ideas that you're sort of having with your specific context in which you work, ways that you might use or adapt the cards. Hong will be sharing the Menti link. There's a two-question, it's a poll and an open-ended question for you to answer. Okay, so we're mixing all of the areas. Workshops, planning, design, charter. That's great. And of course they need to be adapted to do all of those things, probably to do all those things, but it's completely doable. And Hong will be taking you to our card resource hub in a few moments, where we provide the sort of the templates and some of the tools for doing that. So, and in terms of the open-ended responses, okay, the facilitation side, that's great. And there's many more used to create specific learning strategies for specific situations. Exactly, specialized courses and clients, yes. So you could create a card set specific to a client's needs, right? Or around the sort of planning and design of a micro-credential, right? Like it could be all sorts of uses. And that would either expand the set or change the layout a bit, but really sort of keeping the overall sort of cards-based approach in mind to help facilitate these things. Your final card deck might look completely different than the one that we've sort of shown you today, right? But that's why it is an open educational resource. Thank you oh, yes, yeah. Micro-credentials are very, very popular these days. We don't really have a set standard for, say, the competencies that they're addressing, but more and more, I think Canadian, at least higher ed institutions are working on those standards. So, and in corporate, in an industry, they exist, right, depending on the industry. Hong, I think I'll pass it back to you.
Okay, so as we're just about nearing the end of the workshop, I would like to share the path of content of the content strategy cards that I've taken to give you some context on its process, leading us to the session today, and possibly what we may consider in the future. So here in 2009, our instructional design team at Chang School has an onboarding process for new cohorts of such subject matter experts through 2 workshops before the course development starts. And in May, the cards were developed, as John mentioned, to begin that dialogue with SMEs about student engagement early on, with more emphasis on student-centered learning strategies. Then later in 2019, the cards were introduced to wider audiences at an eCampus Ontario conference, and it was designated as an OER after it was received well. In 2020, the cards were then used within internal PD workshops, as already mentioned, for faculty teaching online and face-to-face courses. Soon after that, they were presented in a webinar for the Canadian Association of Instructional Designers as well. By the end of 2020, the cards became the inspiration for our team to launch the course planning tool, which through several iterations and tweaks, we are now using it, as at the beginning of our development process to get subject matter experts to think about the strategies and about engagement and how to make that connection with learners. And we also use it to facilitate the online peer-to-peer sharing among the faculty and SMEs as well. Our team continues to assess the effectiveness of the cards based on feedback. So after each workshop, we gather feedback and we reassess, we reevaluate how the cards can be expanded to address more student-centered and engagement approaches in our developments. Perhaps right now we're thinking about going back to the drawing table to include additional card topics such as teaching presence, equity and inclusion, indigenizing the curriculum, or we may just create a new deck as well. So you've seen the cards in the PDF format in the activity earlier, but we've also created this resource hub. Sorry, let me click on this. Take you to here. So the resource hub has 3 tabs at the top, as you can see. So the first tab is just the cards in itself. This is the link to the PDF, which we shared with you earlier, but also the digital version as well with descriptions for each of the cards and the details at the back that you've seen in the PDF. And within these 2 tab panels, this panel here shows the templates. So you can download them as PowerPoint templates, the colorful version or just the black and white version. And you can use them in any way and adapt them in any way that would suit your training, teaching, course design, training design needs. The second tab at the top, interactive versions of the cards. These are just, we use the OER H5P learning objects to present the cards in different ways. And finally, this last tab here is Card Talk, is a Google form actually. So we as you explore the hub and use or adapt the cards in your work, we encourage you to share your ideas and questions with us. Your comments can help inform further redesign of the cards. We're thinking of creating an FAQ page in the hub and even opportunities for you to collaborate with our team or with each other on these cards. And we hope you make use of this OER hub and share your experiences with us after this workshop or later on as well.
So I've just shared the link to the hub now that Hong has walked through it in the chat. So you can bookmark that for exploring later.
Yes.
And
we're coming down just to the final slides or so. Do you have any questions about the workshop? any of the content, the cards that we've shared with you today, please you can post in the chat or come on the mic. And yeah, we'd love to continue the conversation if, you know, considering the time in this workshop may not be sufficient for you to fully examine the details of each of those cards. You can join us in the virtual hallway after this, you know, chat with us on Twitter or send us an email directly to our emails.
And thanks, Ray, and Noose, if I'm pronouncing that correctly in the chat. Thank you very much. And thank you, Sarah, as well. Yeah, we'd love to hear it when you share it with your team, how that goes, and new ideas. And please do feel free to contact us and let us know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks very much, guys.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot.
So I would just like to thank our speakers as well, John and Hong. And thank you to everyone for participating. So as it was mentioned, there is a virtual hallway it lasts about 30 minutes. So it's a 30-minute break. So love to see everyone there. Thank you.
Thanks, Tanya.
Thank you, Tanya.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.